Captain Ryan Hollister strode into the USMC barracks with the confidence of a man who had never been second-guessed in his life. The sun was just starting to crawl over the horizon, casting long, golden streaks across the concrete, and the smell of sweat, gun oil, and instant coffee hung thick in the air. Boots clacked sharply against the floor as he made his way past the rows of cots, eyes scanning the room like a hawk searching for prey. The barracks were alive with chatter. Younger Marines exchanged jokes about the previous night's drill, while a few veterans lounged on their cots, leaning back like they had seen it all before and probably had. Hollister's gaze, sharp and restless, fell on the newest recruit. The old man was a stark contrast to everyone else. Silver hair, lean frame, eyes that had the kind of calm no one in the room could fake. His uniform was impeccable, almost militaristic in its simplicity, yet there was a weight to his posture, a quiet authority that made even the boldest recruits instinctively step back. Everyone called him JUICEBOX. Hollister had heard the nickname whispered before he arrived, and it made him grin. "Well," Hollister said loudly, letting his voice carry through the barracks, "I guess it's official. We've got JUICEBOX." He let the syllables roll off his tongue, exaggerated for effect. "That's what you're going with, huh? You got that name in boot camp or kindergarten." The room froze. Some of the younger recruits snickered nervously, unsure if it was okay to laugh. Hollister's grin widened, a shark-like display of confidence. He thought this would be easy, a little teasing, a few laughs, and the new guy would crumble under pressure. JUICEBOX didn't move, not a muscle, not a blink. He simply looked at Hollister, eyes narrowing slightly, a faint glimmer of amusement, or maybe it was warning, reflecting off the silver strands of his hair. "Youngbloods," JUICEBOX muttered under his breath, his voice gravelly but controlled. "Call signs are earned." Hollister chuckled, brushing off the remark. "Earned, huh? Sure, old man, let's see what you've got." As the barracks buzzed back into normal chatter, Hollister leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching JUICEBOX with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. His squad members whispered among themselves, glancing at Hollister. Some rolled their eyes, some seemed intrigued. No one, however, wanted to be the first to challenge the old man. JUICEBOX exuded a presence that made even seasoned Marines hesitate, as if his very calm could swallow the room whole. Hollister decided to press the point, stepping closer. "You know, we've had plenty of Marines come and go. Name gotta mean something. You sure you're ready for this?" JUICEBOX didn't answer immediately. He simply tilted his head, scanning the room with eyes that had clearly seen more than Hollister could imagine. Then he finally spoke, quiet but cutting through the chatter like a knife. "I've been ready for a long time, Captain. The name. It doesn't matter, the skill does, the rest you'll find out soon enough." Hollister's grin faltered, just slightly. There was something about the old Marine's calm confidence that didn't sit right. He had faced arrogance before and crushed it, but JUICEBOX didn't seem like someone who could be intimidated by rank or bravado. The barracks doors swung open suddenly, and a gust of warm wind swept through, carrying the sharp scent of gunpowder from the morning's drills. Hollister straightened, brushing off the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. He glanced around at his squad. The younger Marines avoided eye contact, some trying to hide smirks, others wide-eyed at JUICEBOX's quiet authority. "All right, listen up," Hollister barked, clapping his hands. "We've got drills today. I want everyone sharp, focused. JUICEBOX, I expect you to keep up. Don't think just because you've been around a little longer that you can slack." JUICEBOX's response was a slow, almost imperceptible smile, like a predator acknowledging a challenge it already knew it would win. "I don't plan to keep up. I plan to lead." The words hung in the air, heavier than any command Hollister had ever given. The younger Marines exchanged nervous glances. Hollister felt a prickle of unease in his stomach. He tried to shake it off, reminding himself that he was in charge, that he had led dozens of operations without question. But still, there was something in JUICEBOX's eyes that unsettled him. Hollister's mind drifted for just a moment, imagining the drills, the obstacles, the target ranges, and then he snapped back as JUICEBOX moved silently to a cot, methodically checking his gear. Every movement was precise, deliberate, almost ritualistic. It wasn't just efficiency, it was mastery. The kind of mastery that came from decades of experience, from surviving when others didn't. Hollister felt a flicker of anxiety. He wasn't used to being challenged, even subtly, in front of his squad. He wanted to assert dominance, make a joke, but the words caught in his throat. The old Marine's presence was too strong, too quiet, too real. The room settled into an uneasy rhythm. Hollister tried to reassert his control, cracking jokes, making the younger Marines laugh, but every laugh felt hollow now. JUICEBOX didn't react to any of it. Not a flicker, not a smirk, just calm, steady, and unyielding. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the barracks floor, Hollister began to notice something else. The other Marines were watching him as much as they were watching JUICEBOX. Whispers traveled quickly, subtle but unmistakable. Who is this guy? Why isn't anyone messing with him? How does he carry himself like that? Hollister's grin, once sharp and confident, began to feel brittle. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the routine briefing he was about to deliver, but his eyes kept flicking to JUICEBOX. The old man wasn't just standing there. He was observing, measuring, calculating, like he had already predicted the day's drills down to the second. And maybe he had. Hollister's pride burned, and with it, a challenge formed in his mind. He would prove himself. He would show JUICEBOX and the squad that he wasn't just another young officer with a big mouth. But deep down, a small, insistent voice whispered that this wouldn't be easy. Not with JUICEBOX. The morning passed, the squad preparing for drills, but the tension never broke. JUICEBOX moved among them silently, his calm a stark contrast to Hollister's restless energy. The younger Marines tried to mimic their captain, but it was useless. JUICEBOX's presence dominated the room without a word. Finally, as Hollister gave the squad a pep talk, JUICEBOX approached him. Just close enough for Hollister to notice the faint lines etched into his face, scars that told stories Hollister would never hear. "You think this is a game, Captain," JUICEBOX said quietly, voice steady. "You think a name is a joke. You're wrong, and tonight you're going to find out why." Hollister blinked, a shiver running down his spine. The old Marine wasn't threatening. Not really. But the certainty in his voice, the way he carried himself, made Hollister feel exposed, small, unprepared. The barracks seemed to shrink around them. The chatter of younger Marines faded into the background. The sunlight through the windows became harsher, almost spotlighting the moment. Hollister's jaw tightened and he forced a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. JUICEBOX simply turned and walked away, slow, deliberate, leaving Hollister with a single thought he couldn't shake. This is not going to be like any other day in the Corps, and I don't think I'm ready for it. The next morning dawned hot and merciless over the Marine Corps training grounds. Dust swirled across the asphalt and sand, caught in the glare of the early sun. Captain Ryan Hollister tightened his gloves, mentally preparing to show everyone, especially JUICEBOX, who was really in charge. His chest swelled with a mix of adrenaline and pride. Today, he thought, he would assert his dominance. JUICEBOX, calm as ever, stood at the edge of the drill field, a silent shadow among the younger Marines. The old man's posture was deceptively relaxed, yet his eyes scanned the training obstacles, the climbing walls, the low crawls, the mock urban battlefield, with a precision that made Hollister's chest tighten ever so slightly. "All right, squad," Hollister barked, voice carrying over the dry, hot air. "Today's obstacle course is timed. Efficiency, accuracy, speed. Let's see who's ready to lead in the field." The younger Marines nodded eagerly. A few exchanged glances with Hollister, clearly excited for a chance to watch the new recruit, the mysterious JUICEBOX, get humbled. Hollister, sensing the squad's expectation, allowed himself a confident smirk. JUICEBOX said nothing. As the whistle blew, the squad surged forward like a wave. Hollister was in the lead, chest forward, boots pounding the dirt, executing every maneuver perfectly, or so he thought. Every climb, every crawl, every sprint was met with precision and strength, the kind of perfection he was used to seeing in himself. Then JUICEBOX began moving. At first, Hollister barely noticed. The old Marine's movement seemed slower, more deliberate. But as the course progressed, Hollister realized something horrifying. JUICEBOX was not just keeping pace. He was predicting every obstacle, every error, every hesitation before it happened. Hollister dove across a low wall and landed hard, feeling a jolt of pride at his perfect technique. Behind him, JUICEBOX landed with barely a sound, hands and feet perfectly aligned, balance unwavering, movement so smooth it looked like he was gliding over the dirt rather than fighting through it. Hollister's jaw tightened. How is he doing this? He thought, desperation beginning to creep into his confidence. He increased his speed, pushing himself harder, muscles burning, sweat stinging his eyes. But JUICEBOX anticipated it all. At each obstacle, he was already there, already corrected, already completed, already watching Hollister's struggle with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. The younger Marines began to notice. Whispers ran like electricity through the squad. "Did you see that?" one muttered. "How does he move like that?" Another shook his head, wide-eyed. Hollister, hearing their murmurs, felt a flash of panic. His pride was unraveling thread by thread. The course reached the final section, a simulated urban battlefield, complete with barricades, smoke canisters, and targets for live-fire accuracy drills. Hollister rounded a corner, heart-pounding, only to see JUICEBOX emerge from the shadows of a barricade, already in position, weapon steady, eyes calm and focused. "Captain," JUICEBOX said softly, almost casually, "your positioning is predictable." Hollister froze for a fraction of a second, long enough to make his next move sloppy. JUICEBOX moved before he even processed it, intercepting the enemy target with precision. Every action Hollister attempted to regain control of the course was met by JUICEBOX already being there, already ahead. Hollister's face burned, a mix of frustration and disbelief. His squad, normally deferential to him, were now watching JUICEBOX with admiration, silently cheering the old man's effortless domination. Even the grizzled veterans looked impressed, nodding subtly at JUICEBOX's technique. Hollister tried to keep his cool, forcing himself forward, calculating each step, each tactical decision. But JUICEBOX was always 2 steps ahead, always calm, always correct, always untouchable. By the time the squad finished, Hollister was drenched in sweat, muscles trembling, chest heaving. JUICEBOX, by contrast, was pristine, not a bead of sweat, not a misstep. His calm presence was almost supernatural, and it gnawed at Hollister's confidence. The squad gathered around, breathless and exhilarated. Younger Marines exchanged awed glances, quietly whispering about the man they had only just met. Hollister, meanwhile, struggled to maintain composure, pride and humiliation warring within him. One of the recruits, trying to lighten the tension, muttered, "Captain, JUICEBOX made that look easy." Hollister's grin felt brittle, forced. Yeah, he's experienced," he muttered, but even he knew it sounded hollow. JUICEBOX approached him quietly, voice low but firm. "You can lead with speed, Captain," he said, "but leadership isn't about rushing. It's about precision, patience, and seeing the outcome before it arrives." Hollister's chest tightened. The words weren't just advice, they were a rebuke. And worse, he understood that JUICEBOX was right. Every instinct he had relied on, speed, authority, confidence, wasn't enough to match the old Marine's skill and calm precision. Hollister wanted to argue, to assert his rank, to reclaim his authority. But JUICEBOX didn't give him the chance. He simply turned, moving back to inspect his gear, methodical as ever. No hint of triumph, no boastful smile, just quiet competence that left Hollister feeling exposed. The day's exercises continued, but the tension never lifted. Hollister found himself second-guessing every command, every decision. JUICEBOX's calm observation was unrelenting, silently highlighting every flaw, every impulsive move, every trace of overconfidence. By the time the squad returned to the barracks, Hollister was drained. Sweat mingled with dust on his skin, muscles screaming, pride fractured. JUICEBOX, meanwhile, walked with effortless grace, backpack slung over one shoulder, calm and composed as if the day had been nothing more than a stroll in the park. Hollister watched him, a knot of envy, admiration, and fear twisting in his stomach. He realized with an uneasy clarity that this old man was unlike anyone he had ever met in the Corps. JUICEBOX wasn't just experienced. He was a force of nature, disciplined and precise in ways Hollister had never imagined. Later, as Hollister sat on the edge of his cot trying to collect himself, JUICEBOX appeared at the doorway. "Captain," he said softly, voice carrying that quiet authority Hollister could neither command nor ignore. "You have potential, but today you learned something important. Pride without discipline is dangerous." Hollister's throat went dry. He wanted to argue. He wanted to assert his rank, but the truth in JUICEBOX's words hit him hard. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The day after the obstacle course dawned gray and tense, a sharp wind sweeping dust across the sprawling USMC training field. Captain Ryan Hollister tightened his gloves and adjusted his tactical vest, determined to reclaim some measure of authority after the embarrassment of yesterday's obstacle course. He could still feel the sting of JUICEBOX's silent superiority. The old Marine's calm precision had gnawed at his pride, leaving him restless and edgy. Hollister rounded up the squad for what was scheduled as a routine live-fire drill. Targets were lined up at varying distances, some partially concealed behind barriers, while smoke grenades were set to intermittently create chaos and confusion. Normally, Hollister would have dominated this drill, moving swiftly, issuing commands, and executing maneuvers with near-flawless precision. But today, he was hyper-aware of JUICEBOX. The old Marine was already at the field, calm as ever, adjusting his weapon with slow, deliberate movements. Every gesture radiated confidence, patience, and decades of hard-earned expertise. His posture was relaxed, yet Hollister could sense a lethal energy beneath the surface, like a predator patiently observing its prey before striking. "All right, squad," Hollister barked, trying to inject energy into his voice. "This is a live-fire simulation. Accuracy counts, but speed is just as critical. Keep your heads, stay sharp. JUICEBOX, follow my lead and try not to fall behind." JUICEBOX's faint smile was almost imperceptible. "I don't follow, Captain. I anticipate." The whistle blew. Chaos erupted immediately. Smoke hissed from grenades, sand kicked up under pounding boots, and gunfire echoed sharply across the field. Hollister moved first, rushing to take cover behind a simulated wall, scanning for targets. He barked orders at the younger Marines, pushing them to fire accurately, move efficiently, and stay coordinated. At first, it seemed like he had regained control. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the kind he thrived on during drills, the kind that made him feel alive, dominant, untouchable. But then JUICEBOX moved. It was subtle at first, a shift of weight here, a step there. But quickly it became clear that JUICEBOX was everywhere. Every target Hollister aimed at, every angle he thought was secure, JUICEBOX had already covered. Not just covered, he anticipated every move, corrected mistakes before they happened, and neutralized simulated threats with surgical precision. Hollister's heart raced. How is he doing this? He thought, panic creeping into his adrenaline-fueled focus. Hollister tried to adjust, taking wider angles, shooting faster, issuing commands louder. But JUICEBOX moved like a shadow, predicting the squad's every maneuver, covering mistakes Hollister didn't even realize he was making. A younger recruit faltered, tripping over a debris pile. Hollister lunged instinctively to correct him, but JUICEBOX was already there. With a precise, fluid motion, he steadied the recruit, redirected him towards safety, and neutralized the simulated threat, a move so fast and seamless that Hollister barely had time to register it. This is impossible, Hollister thought. He's everywhere at once. The tension among the squad was palpable. The younger Marines exchanged awed, nervous glances. Even the seasoned veterans were leaning forward, studying JUICEBOX's movements with muted admiration. Hollister realized with horror that the man they had been joking about, the call sign he had mocked, was operating on a completely different plane. The drill escalated. Smoke thickened, obscuring vision, forcing quick decision-making. Hollister tried to use his experience, calling out tactics and maneuvers, but JUICEBOX anticipated each tactic before it was verbalized. At one point, Hollister shouted a command to flank a simulated enemy. JUICEBOX moved first, intercepting the target, neutralizing it, and adjusting the squad's positioning, all while Hollister's own plan was still forming in his mind. Hollister's frustration boiled over. His chest heaved, sweat stinging his eyes, muscles screaming with exertion. His pride, once so steadfast, was now a fragile shell. Every time he thought he had an advantage, JUICEBOX was already one step ahead, calm, precise, lethal, without even raising his voice. The final stage of the drill was a simulated hostage rescue, requiring stealth, timing, and flawless coordination. Hollister took point, heart hammering with a mixture of fear and determination. He moved through the mock building, signaling his squad, assessing each doorway, each shadow, each potential threat. And then JUICEBOX moved. Without a sound, he intercepted a hostage before Hollister could even reach the room. Every angle Hollister had planned, every entry and exit point, was already secured. The squad moved fluidly under JUICEBOX's subtle guidance, unaware that their old Marine was orchestrating their actions with almost invisible precision. Hollister watched speechless as JUICEBOX completed the drill flawlessly. Not a single misstep, not a single hesitation. The squad was safe, the hostages secure, and the simulated threat neutralized before Hollister could even issue a final command. The whistle blew, signaling the end of the exercise. Hollister's chest heaved, a mixture of relief and humiliation washing over him. He turned to JUICEBOX, expecting maybe a nod of acknowledgement or a hint of pride at the old Marine's performance. JUICEBOX's expression was neutral, almost casual. He adjusted his gloves, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, and said softly, "You have potential, Captain, but potential alone isn't enough." Hollister's throat went dry. He opened his mouth to respond, to assert his rank, to reclaim some measure of authority, but the words stuck. JUICEBOX didn't need to dominate with words. His presence, his actions, his calm mastery over the drill had already spoken louder than any command Hollister could issue. The squad, wide-eyed and exhilarated, exchanged whispers. "Did you see that?" one breathed. "He's unreal." Hollister's pride burned. He wanted to protest, to justify his own performance, to remind everyone of his experience and rank. But the truth was undeniable. JUICEBOX had outclassed him completely, without arrogance, without boasting, without even raising his voice. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Hollister found himself standing alone near the edge of the training field, heart still pounding, sweat and dust coating his skin. JUICEBOX approached him slowly, eyes steady and calm. "Captain," he said, voice low, steady, like gravel sliding over steel. "Leadership isn't about speed. It isn't about loud commands. It's about anticipation, patience, and the ability to see the outcome before it happens. You will get there, but today you learned why experience always outmatches arrogance." Hollister nodded slowly, swallowing the bitter pill of truth. Pride and embarrassment warred in his chest. For the first time in his career, he felt small, vulnerable, outclassed. JUICEBOX clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Don't take it personally. Take it as a lesson. And remember, a name like JUICEBOX isn't a joke. It's a history, a reputation, and a warning to anyone foolish enough to underestimate it." Hollister opened his mouth, wanting to respond, to argue, to assert some shred of control. but the words faltered on his lips. JUICEBOX turned and walked away, silent as a shadow, leaving Hollister to absorb the weight of what had just happened. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field. Hollister's mind raced. He had thought himself unstoppable. He had thought rank and experience gave him authority. But JUICEBOX had shattered that illusion in a single, flawless drill. The barracks were quiet that evening, save for the hum of the ceiling fans and the occasional creak of the aging floorboards. Shadows stretched across the cots, rifles leaning against walls, and the faint scent of gun oil and sweat lingered in the air. Captain Ryan Hollister slumped onto his cot, the day's live fire drill still reverberating in his chest. Every movement, every command, every attempt at leadership had been effortlessly outmatched by JUICEBOX. Hollister's pride, once sharp and impenetrable, had been chipped away, leaving a raw, uneasy vulnerability. His squad had moved flawlessly under JUICEBOX's silent guidance, following the old Marine without realizing it. He had thought he was leading, but in reality he had been trailing, powerless to assert authority in the presence of the silver-haired legend. He leaned back against the cot, breathing heavily, trying to reconcile the humiliation with his own stubborn belief in his skill. How could one man, so seemingly ordinary, command such authority, precision, and calm under pressure? His mind replayed the drill over and over, every movement of JUICEBOX's hands, every shift of weight, every subtle correction. "Captain!" The voice was soft, low, carrying through the quiet barracks without raising a stir. Hollister's head snapped up to see JUICEBOX standing at the doorway, shadows framing his tall, lean frame. He moved with a deliberate grace, as if the world itself had slowed to accommodate his stride. His medals, partially visible beneath his uniform, caught the dim light, faint glimmers that hinted at a life forged in fire. Hollister swallowed, suddenly aware of how exposed he felt. Yes, JUICEBOX." His voice sounded small even to him. JUICEBOX's eyes swept the room, landing on Hollister with a gaze that felt like steel and ice. "You've been asking questions without asking them," he said. "Curiosity is a strength, but only if you're ready to face the truth behind the answers." Hollister swallowed again, nodding. I guess I am." JUICEBOX's lips curved into a faint smile, almost imperceptible. "Let's take a walk." The barracks were quiet, but each step Hollister took behind JUICEBOX felt like stepping through history. The older Marine led him to a corner of the room where a crate rested, worn and scratched. On top, medals were laid out, some dulled with age, others still gleaming faintly. Hollister leaned forward, eyes widening. Each medal represented a story, a mission, a sacrifice, a brush with death that he couldn't even begin to imagine. "You think the name JUICEBOX is a joke," JUICEBOX said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of decades. "But every call sign has a story. Every name has meaning. You earn it or you live with the consequences if you don't." Hollister swallowed, feeling the words settle like heavy stones in his chest. I didn't mean to." JUICEBOX held up a hand, stopping him. "I know what you think, Captain, that it's a cute nickname, that it doesn't matter. But in a war zone, names aren't decoration. They're reputation, experience, and survival all wrapped into one." He gestured to the medals again, letting silence punctuate the weight of his words. "Vietnam, Desert Storm. Every mission I've survived, every impossible situation I've endured, this is where JUICEBOX came from. Every bruise, every scar, every sleepless night, it's all part of it." Hollister's mouth went dry. He had read books, memorized history, and trained in tactics, but nothing prepared him for the presence of someone who had lived through decades of battle. JUICEBOX wasn't just a Marine. He was a living archive of experience, a walking testament to survival and skill honed under fire. Hollister began, but the words faltered. "I didn't realize." JUICEBOX's eyes softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Most people don't, and that's the point. You learn or you underestimate, and when you underestimate, you pay for it." Hollister's chest tightened. The memory of the live fire drill, the obstacle course, the squad moving effortlessly under JUICEBOX's guidance, all of it came rushing back. He had thought he was commanding, leading, in control. In truth, he had been outclassed at every turn. JUICEBOX leaned against the crate, voice quieter now, almost reflective. "I've been waiting a long time for someone like you to understand this, Captain. Someone who thinks experience can be replaced with speed or confidence. It cannot. Not here. Not in the field. Not in life." Hollister nodded, humbled but still restless. How did you survive all of that? All those battles? Most people wouldn't have lasted a month." JUICEBOX's eyes darkened slightly, memories flickering across his face like shadows. Discipline, observation, patience, and knowing when to act and when not to. Every mistake is a lesson, every victory is earned, and never ever let arrogance blind you. He paused, letting the words sink in. Hollister could feel the weight pressing down on him, not just from JUICEBOX's presence, but from the life and wisdom embedded in that call sign. JUICEBOX wasn't a joke. It wasn't a quirk. It was a legacy. Before Hollister could respond further, JUICEBOX's phone buzzed sharply on the crate. He glanced at it briefly, nodded, and turned toward the door without another word. Hollister watched him go, a knot of curiosity, awe, and unease tightening in his chest. The barracks felt emptier now, quieter. Hollister sat back on his cot, eyes fixed on the door JUICEBOX had just exited. He had thought he understood the man, had thought a nickname and age meant he could dismiss him. Now he realized the truth was far more intimidating. JUICEBOX wasn't just a Marine. He was a force, a living, breathing lesson in patience, precision, and skill that had survived decades where others had fallen. Hollister's pride simmered into determination. He didn't want to admit it yet, but he knew he had been humbled, challenged, and exposed in ways he wasn't ready for. And he realized for the first time that JUICEBOX's lessons were far from over. As the night stretched on, shadows lengthened and the hum of the barracks grew louder in the silence, Hollister's thoughts drifted to the next day. The real test wasn't over yet. JUICEBOX's presence, calm and measured, was a constant reminder that he was still learning, still trailing, still vulnerable. And deep down, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Whatever was coming next, it would be a challenge that would leave him speechless. The early morning sirens cut through the stillness of the barracks like a razor, sharp and urgent. Dust swirled around the base as the squad scrambled, adrenaline instantly surging through their veins. The calm Hollister had tried to reclaim the night before evaporated in an instant. A civil disturbance in a nearby sector had escalated into chaos, and the unit was deployed immediately. Hollister tightened his gloves and checked his weapon. The older Marines moved with quiet efficiency, while the younger recruits were a mix of excitement and nerves. And then his eyes landed on JUICEBOX. As usual, the old Marine was calm, almost unnervingly so. He adjusted his gear deliberately, methodical, every movement precise. The chaos swirling around him, the noise, the dust, the sirens, seemed to bend around JUICEBOX as if the world itself slowed to let him think. Hollister's chest tightened. He had led deployments before, but today he felt exposed. "Stick to the plan," Hollister barked, trying to sound authoritative. "Move in, secure the perimeter, keep civilians safe. JUICEBOX, you follow my lead." JUICEBOX's faint smirk returned. "I don't follow, Captain, I adapt." The transport truck jolted as it carried them into the affected area. Buildings were scarred, smoke curling from a toppled street lamp, and the distant shouts of civilians mingled with the crackle of chaos. Hollister felt his heart hammer, every instinct screaming that this wasn't a drill. They disembarked, moving into the streets with rifles ready, eyes scanning every corner. Hollister tried to maintain control, issuing commands, keeping his squad coordinated. But as soon as he attempted a maneuver to secure a collapsed alleyway, JUICEBOX was already there. Not just there. He had assessed every threat, every angle, and neutralized it before Hollister could even form a plan. A man burst from a side street, brandishing a weapon at one of the younger Marines. Hollister lunged to intercept, but JUICEBOX moved first. With fluid precision, he disarmed the man, redirecting him without so much as a flinch. Hollister froze, heart pounding. He had been seconds too slow, seconds that could have cost a life. "Captain," JUICEBOX said softly, "your instincts are sharp, but your timing is off. Speed without foresight is dangerous." Hollister swallowed hard. He wanted to assert authority, to command, to reclaim control, but every instinct he relied upon was already outpaced. JUICEBOX moved like a shadow, calculating and calm, every step designed to protect, every gesture precise. The squad pushed forward, navigating smoke-filled streets and debris-strewn alleyways. Hollister barked orders, trying to stay one step ahead, but JUICEBOX anticipated every trap, every misstep. He subtly guided the squad, ensuring they stayed safe while Hollister's commands often lagged behind the action. At one point, Hollister spotted a young recruit frozen behind a fallen beam, panic in his eyes. He sprinted toward him, but JUICEBOX was already there, steadying the Marine, directing him out of harm's way, and neutralizing a nearby threat with calm efficiency. Hollister skidded to a stop, chest heaving, watching helplessly. The squad moved as if orchestrated by an invisible conductor. JUICEBOX's presence was like gravity, pulling each action into perfect alignment, leaving Hollister scrambling to keep pace. Every corner they turned, every alley they cleared, JUICEBOX had anticipated and accounted for danger before Hollister even processed it. Hollister's frustration mounted. Pride and fear collided in his chest. He had trained for moments like this, yet here, he was outclassed by a man decades older, moving with the calm authority of someone who had survived far worse. A sudden explosion rocked a nearby building, sending dust and shards of brick into the air. Hollister dove instinctively, but a shadow moved faster. JUICEBOX caught him mid-fall, pulling him behind a stable wall just as the debris slammed down where Hollister had stood seconds before. Hollister's heart stopped. He stared at JUICEBOX, eyes wide with disbelief. I don't understand," he stammered, chest heaving. JUICEBOX's gaze was steady, unflinching. "This is what experience looks like, Captain. Every step, every risk calculated. That's why we survive where others fall." They pressed forward, navigating the chaotic streets. The squad began to trust JUICEBOX instinctively, following his lead without hesitation. Even the younger Marines, who had once laughed at his nickname, now moved in awe of his calm command. Hollister's hands shook as he gripped his rifle. Every instinct screamed to assert control, but he knew it was futile. JUICEBOX had the battlefield in his head before it even existed in reality. They reached the final sector, a street lined with overturned vehicles and screaming civilians. Hostile elements were taking advantage of the chaos, threatening both the squad and the bystanders. Hollister's mind raced. He barked orders, moved, fired, but JUICEBOX was everywhere at once. He intercepted threats, guided civilians to safety, and orchestrated the squad's movements with an efficiency that left Hollister staggering. One Marine tripped, falling into the path of an oncoming threat. Hollister's instincts screamed. He dove, heart racing, but JUICEBOX was faster. He swept the Marine to safety and neutralized the threat before Hollister could even react. Hollister's chest burned with a mixture of awe, fear, and frustration. He realized with reluctant clarity that this wasn't about rank. It wasn't about speed or force. JUICEBOX's calm mastery, honed over decades of combat, made him untouchable in ways Hollister had never imagined. As the mission concluded, the chaos subsided. Smoke drifted lazily through the streets, the squad's adrenaline still thrumming in their veins. Hollister lowered his rifle, sweat and dust streaked across his face. He looked at JUICEBOX, who stood silently, calm as ever, surveying the aftermath like it had been a simple exercise. "You saved me," Hollister said finally, voice barely above a whisper. JUICEBOX didn't smile, didn't brag, he merely nodded. "I didn't save you, Captain. I ensured your training and instincts didn't get you killed. That's the difference." Hollister's pride was bruised, his confidence shaken to its core. But beneath that, a grudging respect began to take root. He had thought he was untouchable, that rank and speed were enough to dominate the field. JUICEBOX had shown him otherwise. The squad regrouped, catching their breath. Younger Marines exchanged wide-eyed glances, muttering about the legend they had just witnessed. Even the seasoned veterans, who had seen countless operations, nodded in subtle acknowledgement of JUICEBOX's skill. Hollister knew in that moment that his perspective had changed forever. Leadership wasn't just about commands, speed, or courage. It was about anticipation, calm under pressure, and experience that could see the battlefield in ways that textbooks and drills could never teach. JUICEBOX clapped Hollister lightly on the shoulder. "You'll get there, Captain, but today you learned the first lesson. Skill without patience, without foresight, is dangerous. Remember that." Hollister swallowed hard, nodding. The lesson cut deep, leaving a mark that would not fade. He had witnessed firsthand why JUICEBOX was a name no one mocked. As the sun dipped lower behind the distant skyline, Hollister felt a chill in his chest, not from the wind, but from the realization that the battles, the drills, and the lessons were far from over. JUICEBOX's calm mastery was a force he had barely begun to understand, and the young captain knew that the next test would push him even further. The night settled over the base like a heavy blanket, the chaos of the day reduced to distant echoes and the occasional hum of a generator. Inside the barracks, the squad had dispersed, most already asleep or quietly tending to their gear. Captain Ryan Hollister remained seated on the edge of his cot, the events of the deployment running like a relentless reel in his mind. He was exhausted, not just physically but mentally, emotionally bruised in ways he had never anticipated. Every time he thought he understood JUICEBOX, another layer of mastery and calm revealed itself, leaving him painfully aware of how little he truly knew. A soft knock at the door broke his spiraling thoughts. "Captain," JUICEBOX's voice came quietly, deliberately. Hollister straightened instinctively, trying to summon authority he no longer felt. JUICEBOX stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The shadows of the room stretched long, the dim light highlighting the fine lines etched into his weathered face. He didn't sit, didn't move unnecessarily. He simply leaned against the wall, calm, deliberate, and steady. Hollister swallowed, feeling a mix of awe and apprehension. "JUICEBOX, you saved me out there." JUICEBOX shook his head. "Saved? No, Captain. I corrected mistakes. I prevented you from repeating errors that could have cost lives. That's not saving, it's leadership." Hollister frowned, chest tightening. "I don't understand. I've led squads before. I've trained, fought, survived. How are you always 2 steps ahead?" JUICEBOX's gaze softened slightly, but his voice remained steady, calm as steel. "Experience isn't just about surviving combat. It's about observing, learning, anticipating consequences before they happen. You think speed and courage are enough, but without foresight, without patience, you risk everything." Hollister exhaled sharply, trying to absorb the truth of the words. He had prided himself on speed, decisiveness, confidence, but JUICEBOX had revealed that these were not enough. Every command he had issued, every maneuver he had attempted in the field had been overshadowed by JUICEBOX's quiet precision. JUICEBOX stepped closer, eyes locking onto Hollister with the weight of unspoken battles. "You're not bad, Captain. You have skill, but skill alone doesn't win wars or survive them. It's the mind behind the skill, the calm under fire, the ability to foresee the consequences of every move. That's what separates Marines from survivors." Hollister's throat went dry. He wanted to argue, to assert rank, to reclaim some measure of control, but the words lodged in his chest. The truth in JUICEBOX's presence, in the quiet authority he radiated, was undeniable. JUICEBOX leaned slightly, voice dropping to a softer, almost confessional tone. "I've been where you are, Captain. Young, proud, full of confidence, thinking rank and courage are enough, thinking I could outpace any threat. I learned the hard way that overconfidence kills. Hollister's eyes widened. What happened? Juicebox's expression darkened, and for a moment the calm that had defined him cracked, revealing a shadowed past. Vietnam. Desert storm. Ambushes, firefights, mistakes that cost lives. I lost men because I underestimated consequences, because I let pride dictate my actions instead of caution and foresight. Every medal you see, every scar I bear, they're reminders of lessons learned the hard way. And that is why I can't let you make the same mistakes. Hollister felt a shiver run down his spine. The weight of Juicebox's history, his decades of survival in the most extreme circumstances, pressed down like a living force. He realized that he had been humiliated not because of lack of skill, but because he had never truly understood what it meant to survive and lead in ways that transcended raw strength or speed. Juicebox's eyes softened again. I'm not here to break you, Captain. I'm here to teach you to survive and to lead. The battlefield doesn't care about arrogance or rank. It only cares if you anticipate, if you act with precision, if you respect the consequences of every decision. Hollister swallowed hard, the enormity of the words sinking in. He had trained for drills, deployments, and exercises, but Juicebox was teaching him something entirely different, something primal, something that didn't fit into textbooks or standard operating procedures. Why help me? Hollister asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Why guide me instead of just letting me fail? Juicebox's faint smirk returned, the kind that hinted at decades of wisdom, experience, and perhaps a touch of dry humor. Because I've been where you are. I've felt the frustration, the humiliation, the sting of realizing I wasn't as in control as I thought. And because I know what it's like to survive, only to see someone else waste that survival through arrogance. Consider this a warning and a lesson. Hollister nodded slowly, trying to internalize the enormity of what he was hearing. Pride warred with humility, frustration collided with awe, and deep down, he knew his perspective had been irreversibly altered. Juicebox stepped back, surveying the quiet barracks, his eyes resting briefly on the squad sleeping peacefully. Tomorrow, you'll face another test, he said. And this time, it won't just be about drills or exercises. It'll be about instincts, foresight, and your ability to remain calm when everything is collapsing around you. Are you ready for that, Captain? Hollister's chest tightened. He wanted to say yes to assert confidence, but the truth lingered like a shadow. I think so, he admitted, voice unsteady. But I've never faced anything like what you've shown me. Juicebox nodded slowly, as if acknowledging both the truth of the statement and the challenge it represented. Then learn fast, because in the field, hesitation can cost more than pride. It can cost lives. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Hollister's mind raced, absorbing Juicebox's words, his calm authority, the weight of decades of combat experience embedded in every gesture, every glance. He realized that he had been humbled not just in skill, but in perspective, and that the real lessons were only beginning. Finally, Juicebox turned toward the door, voice soft but firm. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow the test begins, and this time there will be no room for error. Hollister watched him leave, heart pounding, chest tight. He sank back onto his cot, staring at the ceiling, the shadows of the room stretching long and dark. He felt a mixture of fear, respect, and anticipation, a gnawing certainty that the next day would strip away even more illusions of control, confidence, and dominance. The weight of Juicebox's legacy pressed down on him, and for the first time, Hollister understood the full depth of the call sign he had mocked. It wasn't a joke. It was a lifetime of survival, precision, and lessons forged in fire, and the next challenge would push him to the edge of everything he thought he knew. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the squad assembled on the edge of the training perimeter. Dust hung in the air, mingling with the faint smell of spent gunpowder and earth. Captain Ryan Hollister stood rigid, chest tight, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had trained for countless drills, deployments, and exercises, but today felt different. Today, JUICEBOX had promised a test like no other, and Hollister could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, suffocating in its intensity. The older Marine, calm as dawn itself, stood a few meters away, scanning the training ground with the eyes of someone who had survived wars that Hollister could only read about in books. His posture was relaxed, yet there was a lethal precision in every subtle movement. The way he adjusted his rifle, the tilt of his head, the way his boots crunched softly over the gravel. JUICEBOX didn't just occupy space, he commanded it without a word. "Captain," JUICEBOX said quietly, voice carrying over the low wind. "This is the culmination of everything. Today isn't just about skill. It's about awareness, anticipation, patience, and composure under pressure. Are you ready to lead, or will you fall into instinct and arrogance?" Hollister clenched his jaw, nodding. "I'm ready." JUICEBOX's faint smirk returned. "We'll see." The squad moved into position, entering a mock urban battlefield designed to simulate chaos, confusion, and extreme danger. Smoke generators hissed, flares flickered, and the sound of simulated gunfire ricocheted off the walls of derelict buildings. The objective was clear: navigate the streets, locate and rescue a simulated hostage, and extract safely, all while neutralizing hostile elements embedded within the environment. Hollister took point, instincts kicking in. He called out commands, coordinated his squad, and moved with measured precision. Yet almost immediately, he felt the familiar tension. Something was always one step ahead of him. Targets he hadn't anticipated appeared, angles he thought secure were compromised, and every move he tried to make was subtly redirected by JUICEBOX's quiet interventions. Hollister's frustration built. He barked orders louder, moved faster, tried to regain control, but JUICEBOX's calm presence was everywhere. The older Marine anticipated every misstep, corrected every oversight, and guided the squad with a precision that made Hollister's attempts look amateurish. A sudden explosion from a simulated IED rocked the street. Smoke and dust filled the air, obscuring vision. Hollister dove instinctively, heart hammering, only to feel a hand grab his shoulder, steadying him. JUICEBOX's calm eyes met his. "Not every reaction is right," JUICEBOX said. "Sometimes waiting and observing is the difference between survival and disaster." Hollister felt his chest tighten. He realized with growing dread that his training, speed, and instincts alone were not enough. JUICEBOX's decades of experience had honed him to anticipate the battlefield before it even existed, and Hollister had been chasing shadows all morning. The squad advanced through the maze of streets, dodging obstacles, navigating smoke, and neutralizing threats. Hollister tried to adapt, forcing himself to slow down, to think, to anticipate. But every time he paused, JUICEBOX was already 3 steps ahead. A simulated sniper appeared on a rooftop, and Hollister dove for cover. JUICEBOX, moving almost invisibly, had already neutralized the threat, ensuring the squad's safe passage. Hollister's pride burned, chest tight, frustration simmering into desperation. He had thought he was ready for anything. Yet here he was, watching the man he had mocked, the man he had underestimated, move like a shadow through chaos, guiding, protecting, teaching, all without ever seeming to exert effort. The final objective loomed: the hostage's location, deep inside a building rigged with multiple threats and traps. Hollister signaled the squad forward, tension coiling in his chest. Every instinct screamed to act decisively, to lead, to assert control. But as they approached the building, JUICEBOX placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Stop," he said. "Observe first. The threats are not always where you expect. Reaction without observation will get someone killed." Hollister hesitated, heart racing, then nodded. JUICEBOX's calm authority was unshakable. Together they assessed the structure: entry points, possible ambushes, lines of sight, and traps. Slowly, methodically, they moved in. Inside, the building was a labyrinth. Shadows twisted, doors creaked, and simulated hostiles lurked around corners. Hollister's palms were slick with sweat as he moved cautiously, rifle raised. Every instinct screamed at him to rush, to act, but he remembered JUICEBOX's lesson: patience, observation, foresight. Suddenly, a simulated hostage screamed from a side room. Hollister signaled the squad to cover, moving to secure the room. A flash of movement caught his eye, a hostile element. But before he could act, JUICEBOX was there, neutralizing the threat with effortless precision. Hollister froze, heart hammering, chest tight. "You are not wrong to act," JUICEBOX whispered, "but timing and anticipation determine survival. Learn to see before you move." The hostage was secured, and the squad moved toward extraction. Hollister's chest heaved as he followed JUICEBOX's lead, slowly realizing that the true test wasn't about speed, shooting, or command. It was about mastering oneself under pressure. As they reached the extraction point, a final threat appeared, a simulated ambush designed to test the squad's composure. Hollister moved to lead, but JUICEBOX intervened subtly, guiding him through the chaos, ensuring the squad remained unharmed. Hollister felt a mixture of awe, frustration, and gratitude. He realized that JUICEBOX had taught him a lesson deeper than drills or deployments. True leadership wasn't about pride. It was about awareness, patience, and the courage to acknowledge one's own limits. At last, the whistle blew, signaling the end of the exercise. Hollister lowered his rifle, chest tight, muscles trembling. He turned to JUICEBOX, eyes wide, the weight of the morning pressing down on him. JUICEBOX's gaze met his, calm and steady, and he said simply, "You have potential, Captain, but potential without humility is dangerous. Remember that." Hollister swallowed, nodding. Pride and humility wrestled within him, leaving a raw, unshakable respect for the man who had guided him through the test. He realized that mocking a name, underestimating a legend, and relying solely on instinct had almost cost him, and today he had seen why JUICEBOX was not a name to be joked about. The squad gathered, exhausted but exhilarated, exchanging glances of admiration and awe. Hollister, for the first time, felt the weight of experience, the true depth of JUICEBOX's skill and wisdom, and understood that this was not just training, but a lesson that would shape him for the rest of his career. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, Hollister watched JUICEBOX stride away, calm, collected, untouchable. He knew that the lessons would continue, that the journey was far from over, and that he had been forever changed by the quiet, relentless mastery of a Marine whose reputation was earned in fire, patience, and precision. The morning fog clung to the edges of the base like a lingering secret. Captain Ryan Hollister had barely slept. His mind replayed the events of the past days, the obstacle course, the live fire drills, the emergency deployment, and the ultimate test. He had been humbled, frustrated, and awed, yet he had survived. He had learned lessons no book or drill could teach, but deep down he knew something was still missing. He found JUICEBOX on the training field, alone, inspecting equipment with deliberate care. The older Marine's presence filled the space with calm authority. The medals, the scars, the quiet mastery, it all radiated experience Hollister could barely comprehend. "JUICEBOX," Hollister said, his voice quieter than usual, almost reverent. I understand the lessons. I think I finally do, but there's still one thing I don't get. Why JUICEBOX? Why that name?" JUICEBOX paused, letting the question hang in the cool morning air. For a moment he looked out across the empty field, expression unreadable, eyes clouded with memory. Then slowly he turned to Hollister. "Most Marines think call signs are random, funny, catchy, easy to remember. But a true call sign is earned. It carries history, reputation, and a warning. JUICEBOX isn't a joke, Captain. It's a testament to survival, to ingenuity, and to lessons learned the hard way." Hollister tilted his head, confused. "Survival, ingenuity, I don't understand. It sounds childish." JUICEBOX's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Childish, maybe to the uninitiated, but in the field survival isn't glamorous, And sometimes the most innocuous things, like a juice box, can mean the difference between life and death. He walked toward the center of the field, gesturing for Hollister to follow. The older Marine stopped in front of a makeshift training obstacle, a relic from decades of drills and deployments. He crouched, pointing to a small, inconspicuous detail hidden within the structure, a series of faint markings, old and weathered. During Desert Storm, JUICEBOX began, voice steady but laced with memory, my squad was pinned down by enemy fire. We were cut off, outnumbered, and morale was low. Supplies were limited, and one of the younger Marines, nervous, scared, panicked. He dropped a critical ration box, a box of juice and rations. Chaos erupted. Hollister's eyes widened, leaning in. He could almost hear the echoes of the story, the tension in JUICEBOX's voice, the shadows of the battlefield painting the scene. "I grabbed that box," JUICEBOX continued, "and I used it, not just for sustenance but strategically. It became a signal, a cover, a decoy. That box, that simple, ordinary juice box, it saved lives. It taught me a lesson: resourcefulness, creativity, and calm under pressure matter more than brute strength. From that day on, I was called JUICEBOX. And every time someone underestimates the name, they learn too late why it commands respect." Hollister's mouth went dry. The weight of the story settled over him like a physical force. He thought he had understood JUICEBOX before, his skill, his calm, his precision. But he had never grasped the depth of the legend, the life experience, and the ingenuity that forged the name itself. JUICEBOX's eyes locked on Hollister's. "You see, Captain, skill and training will get you far. Speed, confidence, even courage will carry you through some obstacles. But real survival, real leadership, comes from understanding context, thinking ahead, and using everything at your disposal, no matter how small or seemingly trivial. A name, a tool, a detail. Sometimes the smallest thing can turn the tide of life and death." Hollister swallowed hard, chest tight, the enormity of realization sinking in. For days he had mocked the nickname, underestimated the old Marine, and clung to pride as his shield. Now he understood that the call sign was not just a name. It was a history, a legend, a warning, and a lesson wrapped into one. He could feel his hands trembling slightly, a mixture of awe, humility, and a newfound respect for everything JUICEBOX represented. The obstacle courses, the live fire drills, the emergency deployment, they had all been lessons leading to this moment of revelation. JUICEBOX stepped closer, voice dropping to a quieter, almost conspiratorial tone. "I've spent decades in situations where mistakes cost lives. I've seen Marines fall because they underestimated details, because they thought skill alone was enough. The call sign JUICEBOX reminds me, and everyone who faces me, that survival is never guaranteed, and that sometimes the most unassuming things carry the greatest weight." Hollister's chest tightened. He realized he had been humbled at every level: skill, strategy, leadership, and now understanding. He had thought he was the expert, the leader, the one in control. And yet JUICEBOX had guided him, challenged him, protected him, and revealed truths he had never imagined. "Captain," JUICEBOX said, his voice steady and commanding once more, "you've survived the tests, and you've learned lessons that many Marines never grasp. Remember this: leadership isn't about pride. It's about foresight. Survival isn't about strength. It's about patience and ingenuity. And respect isn't about rank. It's about acknowledging the lessons of those who came before." Hollister nodded slowly, swallowing the last remnants of his pride. He felt a strange mixture of relief, awe, and gratitude. He had been humbled, educated, and inspired, all in the shadow of a Marine whose legend had been forged in fire, chaos, and life-or-death ingenuity. The squad gathered in the distance, unaware of the intimate lesson that had just unfolded. Hollister turned to JUICEBOX, voice low but sincere. "I understand now. The name, the story, everything. I won't forget it. I won't underestimate it ever again." JUICEBOX's faint smirk returned, tinged with the satisfaction of a lesson delivered and absorbed. "Good. Remember, Captain, words, names, and details carry power. Never underestimate them, and never underestimate what's quietly waiting for you when you think you're in control. Hollister exhaled, chest tight, heart still racing. He had survived, but he was changed, forever. He had witnessed skill that transcended training, calm that defied chaos, and ingenuity that turned the most ordinary object into a lifeline. And he had finally understood the true meaning behind the call sign he had mocked: JUICEBOX. The morning fog began to lift, sunlight glinting off the edges of the field. Hollister looked at JUICEBOX, then at his squad, and finally at himself. He felt the weight of history, experience, and humility settle firmly in his chest. He realized that he had been given a gift, a chance to witness mastery, to learn lessons no manual could teach, and to understand the full depth of what it meant to survive and lead. JUICEBOX turned and walked away, silent and steady, leaving Hollister standing there, speechless, humbled, and profoundly changed. The legend of JUICEBOX was no longer just a nickname. It was a living testament to skill, ingenuity, and the lessons learned under fire. Hollister took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day, the lessons, and the story settle within him. He had been challenged, humbled, and transformed. And for the first time, he truly understood why some legends are never mocked, and why the smallest details, when combined with wisdom and experience, can command absolute respect.